Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody is surviving Snowmageddon in Toronto today. My name is Stephen Trainer. I'll be speaking on behalf of the Canadian Sport Tourism Alliance. I serve as a project manager there, working on a number of different initiatives. I also teach at Algonquin College the sport tourism major events and bidding processes for Algonquin. I'm pleased to be guest speaking today to you guys. Your professor has told me a lot of great things about you, and I know that you're joining me in wishing her and Team Ontario and all the other athletes success in Red Deer this week and next week for the Canada Games, which is starting very, very soon. So good luck to Jennifer and good luck to Team Ontario. The first thing I want to do, I know that we have about 39 people on the line. I want to make sure that everybody can hear me properly. So if you look at your dashboard, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the GoToWebinar software, but the dashboard there, you have a raise your hand button. Can everyone press that button in order to let me know that they can hear me? Excellent. So we've got people raising their hands. I just want to point out that because there's so many people on the line, we have all other attendees muted. If you have a question, there's definitely ways that you can let me know. If you have a question, you can use the chat feature and send in a question, or you can raise your hand. It'll notify me as I'm going through the presentation. I'd be more than happy to stop at key sections of the presentation and answer questions for you. The first thing I want to do in order to get started today is I actually want to show you a video that kind of highlights sport events and sport tourism in Canada. It's a joint production with the CBC, with Destination Canada, and with the CSTA. And hopefully the audio will cooperate on this. We'll be able to get some good sound on this, and you'll be able to see it.
We almost define ourselves through the power of sport. It's part of our DNA, it's in our blood. We're polite, but we're fierce competitors. Having competed in thousands of arenas around the world, there is no place like Canada.
Canada is known for putting on amazing events. Every event we do in Canada comes with the passion of our volunteers behind it. We have the plans, we have the people, and most of all, we have the passion to deliver on the best experiences for competitions anywhere.
I think in the Olympics in Vancouver 2010, Canada showed the world really what it has to offer.
From the Pan Am and Para-Pan Am Games and the Women's FIFA World Cup, we have created that environment for sport that's second to none.
Les événements qu'on soit en ville, ça fait tellement une grande différence dans le chiffre d'affaires, dans l'achalandage, dans le nombre d'employés qu'on engage.
You will have an experience of a lifetime.
Athletes love coming here beyond the scope of competition. There are always so many places to go and see, whether it's skiing in Whistler or checking out the sites in Halifax.
If you're thinking of bringing your event here, our people will welcome you with open arms, so you'll not find a better place, where everybody is just so happy to welcome you.
Guaranteed success, that's Canada.
All right, so that video from Team Canada, which is the CSTA and many other partners, kind of highlights exactly all the things that are going on in Canada now, the exciting nature of the sport events and sport tourism business. Certainly there's been a lot of changes over the last 10 to 20 years. We've seen a lot of growth and success. and it's really exciting to see what the next steps will be in terms of Canada's hosting background. And we'll touch on where Canada sits internationally in terms of their international ranking and all the elements that lead to that sort of international sport hosting and national sport hosting process. The first thing I want to do after that video is I want to actually throw up a poll. Now, your professor has told me that your group is much more versed in sport tourism, much more experienced in sport tourism than another class that I'll be working with later on in the month. But I just wanted to use our poll feature to actually ask you a poll about your level of participation with major games or major sport events. So I'm about to launch a question about whether or not you have you've ever participated in major games, whether it be a participant, a coach, a spectator, or a volunteer. Have you ever participated? So we're getting very close to being almost 100% of the votes coming in. And it's looking like a decided number of people are on the 68% side. 68% say yes, they have worked or been part of a major game in the past. 28% no, and 3% are unsure. So I'm looking forward to going through, and we can see there it was the poll results: 68% yes, 28% no, 3% unsure. And I'm looking forward to going over sort of the basic definition, the basic introduction to it, and then getting to highlight some of the areas that will help you guys with your major bid that you're going to be doing later on. So we've got a couple of CSTA tools and templates that are going to be very helpful to you guys. I know that Jennifer has touched on them. She'd like me to go over those, and I'm looking forward to sharing my experiences with you and maybe some anecdotes as well. So what is sport tourism? Well, sport tourism is simply defined as any activity in which people are attracted to a particular location as a sport event participant, an event spectator, or to attend sport attractions or business meetings. It's always important to know the difference between sport tourism and sport event. Sport event could simply be as simple as having a backyard football game, and sport tourism is much more intentional and in a different proposition. It's different from just a sport event. Well, who is the CSTA? Who am I? I've already given you a little bit of background about me. My background is through Western academically. I've worked in the sports sector for quite some time with a number of different groups: Canadian Olympic Committee, Canada Games, and with the CSTA for over 13 years. But the CSTA has been around since 2000. Serving as a non-governmental, not-for-profit, tourism industry-driven organization. It was formed in November 2000 with the support of the Canadian Tourism Commission, now known as Destination Canada. And it originally only had 18 founding municipal members. So now we have 500 plus members today, 150 municipalities across the country, and 300 plus national and provincial sport organizations. So it's really had an unprecedented amount of success in terms of bringing in members and having people come on board with the mission of the CSTA. One of the things that we like to get across right off the bat is we are not a funding agency. So I always appreciate people following up with me after the presentation, but the CSTA actually does not provide funds to sport events. It actually works on behalf of the sector, so we are not a funding agency. The mission of the CSTA is to increase Canada's capacity to attract and host sport tourism events, to promote Canada as a preferred host for international sport events, and promote a planned, coordinated, and strategic approach to event hosting. Now, this would include government relations domestically, tools and templates and best practices, or leading a Team Canada delegation overseas in order to attract international events. So, in terms of our members, who is a member of the CSTA? We have municipalities or cities. We over 150 at this point. We have national and provincial sport organizations. We have organizing committees. We have hotels, airlines, car rentals, rails, and bus lines. We call those industry suppliers. They serve an incredible role in sport events because you cannot have sport tourism unless you have hotels to put people in, airlines and car rentals, rails, and bus to transport. Those are extremely important partners in the overall strategy of sport tourism. Facility venue owners and institutions, consulting firms and agencies that provide expertise to different groups, and education. So we've got professors, researchers, and students like yourself. Because there's a storm today, it's always important to mention that the perfect storm can often even sidetrack even the best events. There's lots of things that have happened over the last 20 years that have affected the sport tourism industry along with other industries in terms of drawing people to come and participate in events. And these types of things are 9/11. Now, most of you are too young to understand the grasp of 9/11. You know of it, but probably weren't fully aware of what was going on whenever 9/11 happened, but it really changed the way that people travel, and it also changed the way that people go from country to country. Before 9/11, you were able to travel across the border without a passport. You were able to simply bring your license or a piece of government issued ID, and you were able to cross the border. Now that seems like a distant memory, and unfortunately, that can be a bit of an issue because if you're looking to host an international event and bring people from America or different countries, America especially, they don't have not as many, a higher percentage have passports as Canadians. We take it sort of granted that everybody has a passport and we like to travel. Not as many Americans travel, so we've had to adjust and address that issue in order to be able to allow those American teams to get across the border. Also around the time of 9/11 was SARS, which was a communicable disease. Those are examples of whenever there's an epidemic or a flu or something like that go around, it can really put a damper on travel. Mad cow disease, another example of a disease that an H1N1 also gave concern for people traveling for events. Currency exchange. So whenever the Canadian currency is equal or more than the United States, it actually makes people traveling less likely to come. Now, in today's current climate, our currency is actually in a good place that encourages American teams or at all levels to come to Canada and spend money because their money goes further whenever they're traveling. When it's the reverse, when the Canadian dollar is at par or worth more, then you've got a bit of an issue from a hosting perspective. Gas prices, also something we're currently experiencing some good news on, but it is fluctuated, and the difference between 90 cents a liter and $1.50 a liter can make a big difference in terms of teams that are coming from across the border and having to make a decision about whether to come. Recession, we like to say that one of the best parts about sport tourism and about sport events is it's somewhat recession proof, and that if your kid or if you have an event or a tournament that you were really passionate about, whatever the level is, you're more than likely to go somewhere in order to participate in it. If it's just a simple vacation and times are tough from a recession perspective, then you're looking at more people that are going to lean towards staycations or opting out of it. So that's one of the things about sport tourism that really helps out the economy and helps out the tourism industry, is that people that are involved are usually going to go regardless of the economic status, whether it's recession or good times. Border issues and documentation. I talked about it before with 9/11. When these things change and there's complexities added, it makes it harder for teams to get across the border, and it also makes sport organizations or event hosts puts the onus on them to communicate any sort of issues or documentation that their athletes are going to need in order to get to their event on time. Here's an example of an article from the Globe and Mail. We talk about sport tourism, how it's a financial power, and this is really something that's kind of new in terms of being recognized by people outside of the industry, that people understand that there are a huge economic impact to hosting these events and bringing people from out of town, spending new money into the economy, buying things, staying in hotels, etc. And we'll talk in depth about one of the major tools that we use, the Sport Tourism Economic Assessment Model, We'll talk about how we use that in order to truly measure the economic impact of events and provide governments across Canada with an idea of how much events are worth. Sport tourism has become a stabilizing force during times of volatility within the tourism industry. So as I said previously, when you have a market or a recession, sport tourism can sometimes provide that stability to help out. When we talk about international events in Canada, a lot of the support for these events can come from Sport Canada and the federal government. It comes specifically from the federal hosting program. For those of you that are working on a major bid, you're going to want to pay close attention to this hosting program, because it would be part of your budget in terms of figuring out exactly where revenues could come from the government. So if you're hosting an international sport event, you can expect that you would receive some sort of funding and support from your municipal government. You would receive some money from the provincial government, and you would also be looking to receive money from the federal government through Sport Canada's hosting program. So this has been going on since 2008. In over a 10-year period, 718 international single sport events, including multi-sport events, were supported. It was an investment of $89.7 million total. $9 million, which works out to about $9 million annually. An average of 70 plus events per year are supported, and 43 different sports are involved in terms of being funded and supported by this hosting program. Very important thing to know for your major bids and as you move along in the sector if you're involved with a national sport organization. One of the things that we like to highlight about the fact, a lot of people, when they think about major games, major events, they think about the World Juniors, and they think about some of the bigger name things that you would see on TV. But small events aimed at kids of all youth levels can prove to be just as important as an international event. I'll give you an example. Ottawa in 2009 hosted the World Junior Hockey Championship, which was a very important event for Ottawa and had a large economic impact, as it did when it was hosted in Toronto, both in 2015 and 2017. However, the World Juniors economic impact was actually smaller than an annual tournament that's hosted in Ottawa called the Bell Capital Cup. Now, I'm not sure if any of the 73 of you that are on the call right now would have actually participated as a minor hockey player, but that attracts boys and girls from all over the world to participate in this annual event that Ottawa pays no money for in terms of a rights fee. They have an absolute ton of parents, grandparents, and kids and families that come to Ottawa during Christmas time, which is usually a very slow time for Ottawa, and it has a huge economic impact, and it's hosted every year. So one of the things you notice is that from the player to parent ratio, the smaller the kids, the more likely there are to be more parents and family members that attend and support when traveling. You'll also notice that there seems to be more parents and family that attend for female hockey events. So from a sport tourism perspective, the importance of hosting female events of all ages should be given equal, if not a little bit more priority in terms of when you're looking to bring events and set up your sport tourism strategy for your municipality. What are the type of events? I'm sure you already have heard of these. We'll go over them quickly. We'll talk about a multi-sport major games. We're talking, Professor Bennett is away at the Canada Games now, serving as a chef de mission for Team Ontario. And the Canada Games is the perfect example of a national multi-sport and major games in Canada. We've got professional and amateur leagues and events. We've got amateur single sport events. We've got inter-community events. And we've got manufactured or created events. An example of a manufactured event is the World Pond Hockey Championships. This is hosted in Plaster Rock, New Brunswick, a population of 1,131. Launched in February 2002 with 40 teams. The 2018 version included 110 teams. So that's a lot of people to bring into a town where there's usually only 1,131. You can do the math to know that It would be an incredible amount of resources that would have to go into hosting in such a small community. There's an estimated 8,000 visitors over 4 days, 300 volunteers, 20 rinks on Rollston Lake, and the accommodations are Plaster Rock, Grand Falls, and Perth Andover. So we have a situation where we have such a popular event bringing people from all over the world, and these people are staying quite a distance in order to participate in this event. So it speaks to the success of the tournament, and also the ability for the tournament and the local surrounding region to rally behind to provide the accommodations and supplies that people need to host this event. Closer to you guys, we've got in Brantford, we've got the Walter Gretzky Street Hockey Tournament. The 2010 tournament was recognized with the Guinness World Book of Records as the biggest street hockey tournament. 250 teams and 2,190 players from all over Ontario and the northern United States. And it's a fundraiser for the Lung Association of Canada. So over $125,000 raised in the last 3 years. So it's a sport tourism with a purpose, bringing lots of people into the city of Brantford, which has a very strong sport tourism history and strategy. And it's also doing good by raising money for a very important cause. When we look at, I've talked about a lot of events already of different levels. When we look at how Canada is ranked on the world stage, there's a company called SportCal, which is a UK-based firm, and it collects data in order to and provides analysis to provide a projection or a ranking of who the best host countries are in the world. So a lot of factors are taken into consideration, including past events, future events that are going to be held, facilities, that type of thing. Canada currently ranks 5th. We've ranked as high as 2nd on this list, but right now we currently rank 5th as of 2018, and we're looking to improve our status. But it's incredible that Canada, which is not the largest in terms of population, has been able to do such a great job of hosting and make so many improvements over the years by using an intentional approach and working with tools and templates on behalf of the entire sector. So when we look at how we represent ourselves internationally, we look at Team Canada, which is a group led by the CSTA and CBC Sports and Destination Canada that travels once a year. It's a co-leadership model with Destination Canada since 2007. We collaborate with the Canadian Olympic Committee and CBC Sports. And then once a year, there's an event where Team Canada and its representatives meet with international sport organizations to talk about opportunities to host their events in Canada in the future. The next event is going to take place in Gold Coast, Australia, which recently hosted the Commonwealth Games last year, and it should be an excellent event. This past year, it was in 2018. It was held in Thailand for the first time as well. So it's a chance for the CSTA to work with its partners and represent our nation and develop new opportunities for hosting. One of the things that's happening in March of this year, it happens every year, is the Sport Events Congress. It's hosted in Ottawa. I know that your professor will be attending. If you're interested in volunteering and making the trip up, you can check out our website at CanadianSportTourism.com. And we have about 400 delegates every year. It's a business-to-business function that features sort of NSO leaders, National Sport Organization leaders, and industry stakeholders. Lots of networking that goes on. Incredible opportunity if you're interested in taking part. It's 3 days. There's lots of social activities as well that our volunteers get to take part in. I know that there's a silent disco, there's going to be axe throwing, all kinds of crazy stuff that's going on. But most importantly, the networking, best practices, and sessions, as well as training and education that goes on, is extremely vital to the sector. And that's going to be held from March 19th to the 21st in 2019, this year. Okay, I've told you all the great things that are going on about sport tourism. What are some of the issues that people in the sport tourism world kind of worry about? Well, now that the sector has become more and more, increasingly attractive to different municipalities, there's now fierce competition from other communities and countries. For instance, if you're a Canadian city and you'd like to host the World Championships for Hockey Canada, it's increasingly becoming more and more expensive. They ask for a host fee right off the bat, and so you're looking at anywhere between 12 and 20 million dollars that has to be forked over by the province or by the municipality in order to host a Hockey Canada event. And true, there's a tremendous amount of economic impact that comes from those events, but it definitely has the fierce competition has made winning the rights to these bids tougher and tougher. We've got an issue of aging infrastructure. I have a bit of a background in about 4 years of working in government relations, and I can tell you one of the major things that kind of is scary is the fact that we have a lot of infrastructure that's becoming outdated in terms of facilities, pools, tracks, arenas, all that stuff across Canada, and we have a need for a renewal and to use infrastructure money in order to build those new things. One of the key issues in when you talk about sport events in Toronto is you have such a large population, and there's only so many facilities in order to access them, in order to train athletes and to provide services for the local residents. So one of the key issues that you hear a lot is about aging infrastructure, and it's going to continue to be one of those issues as we move forward. Displacement and dislocation. So you're going to host a major international event. Let's take an example that you're hosting a cycling event in your city. Well, that's great, but it's going to cause some displacement or dislocation when roads are shut down. Or if you're working with a different sport, if you've got a major golf course and you have an international golf event, that means everybody that usually pays dues and uses the facility isn't going to have access to it. And so if you don't manage that properly, you can have a lot of people that are not happy about successful international events or national events because it's preventing them from using it to the fullest extent. Risk assessment and management, taking risk on. You can't just bid on things. You need to make sure that you do proper risk assessment and make sure that there is a good chance that your event will be successful if you're able to successfully gain the rights to an event. Increasing rights fees, as spoke about the Hockey Canada example, the fierce competition is leading to the fact that it costs a lot to host these games or to get the rights to the games. And so cities are going to have to make decisions about whether or not those rights fees are worth the cost, despite the fact that they would all love to host the event. Opportunity costs. If you're going to actually host an event, what does that mean that you don't have time or you don't have resources for to host, and which is more important? Which event is more important? So, and volunteer capacity. When we look at volunteers, there's lots of great stories. I'm sure you guys have all volunteered, and you are amazing for doing that. Volunteers are amazing, but when you're really, really successful at hosting events in your town or your city, one thing that can maybe really happen is that volunteers that you have that are great get burnt out, and it's really hard to replace those people. So being able to manage volunteer capacity, to have enough people to do all the events that you want to do is an issue. One of the trends we see is an increased emphasis on manufactured or created events. Masters level events, those are for people that are 55 years old and older. They still want to stay healthy. It's a growing trend. Events involving young children, encouraging family travel and vacations. So having family vacations as part of a youth event. You can have lots of stories. I'm sure that you guys have some stories yourself where you went to a hockey tournament in Florida and your whole family came with you and enjoyed the Florida experience. That is becoming more and more habitual in the industry. We've got triathlons, duathlons, and cycling, which are extremely popular for both high performance and amateurs. We've got parasport events, increasing importance on having Paralympic or parasport events across the country. And we've got extreme sports, and we can talk a little bit about the extreme sports that we do have. Tough Mudder. It sounds almost crazy. If you had asked me 10 years ago, we're going to be hosting this event where people run through the mud and jump over obstacle courses in the middle of nowhere, I would have said, no way are you going to be able to have thousands of people that are interested in signing up for that. But Tough Mudder is one of the many examples of many events that are hosted across the country in which people sign up and pay to exactly do what I thought would have been impossible to do. It raises these kinds of created extreme events, sort of create issues and challenges. It's an exciting opportunity. You can host it in places that wouldn't otherwise be able to host sport events, but you're also putting yourself out there in terms of figuring out how we're going to handle risk, how we're going to make sure that we have the proper facilities and the proper medical services and all that stuff to host these types of events. Red Bull Crashed Ice, extremely successful. It's been hosted originally in Quebec City and has moved all over. It's been hosted in Edmonton. This is the shot of the Edmonton one, but it's also was hosted in Ottawa, right next to downtown in Parliament Hill. It was really incredible to see the amount of crowds that came out and saw these people skating down the track. There's also a dual or multi-city hosting model. So in the past, we had only one city hosting a World Juniors or a major event like that. Now we see that there's the idea of hosting with dual cities. Edmonton and Calgary hosting the World Juniors, Montreal in Toronto as well. FIFA World Cup actually being in three different countries for the 2026 World Cup. So those are exciting things. I'm going to take a quick pause right now because I have a question. I'm going to pull. The question is from Spencer, and he asks, is Mud Hero an extreme sport event? Yes, I think we would classify that as both a created event and an extreme sport event. Thank you for the question, Spencer. Once again, if you do have questions, please feel free to send them as I go along. I will have no hesitation to stop and ask. We've got another question right here. That's excellent. Yeah, so please keep those questions coming in, and I'll be happy to go through them and use that chat function. So provide one of the things about having multiple cities hosting event is provides access to a variety of sport facilities and infrastructure, spectator and commercial markets, municipal, provincial funding sources, volunteers, and media outlets. Sometimes dual cities or cities working together and able to share an event actually makes them a better host. So it's something that we're going to have to watch and pay attention to as we move along, because it seems to be an emerging trend. Now, in order to make sure that we get some value add for you guys moving forward, Professor Bennett has asked me to talk to you about ways that you can help build a sport tourism strategy. So I'm going to go over an overview of some of the CSTA tools and templates that you have access to through this class and through this course. But also I'll highlight some of the key ones that you're really going to want to focus on and that you can use for your major bid later on. So there's the CSTA has both tools and templates. On the template side, we're continually adding templates, basically best practices. So rather than getting every single city or sport to come up with their own way of doing things, it's sometimes better for an industry to come up with a template to kind of, instead of recreating the wheel, allow the sector to easily access and pull up and figure out different ways to do things. So we've got over 10 templates now that have been built that have come out of a result of our members coming back to us and say, geez, I really would like to know how to do this a little bit better. Or is there best practices for doing this? Usually there is. Usually we have an author that's able to provide that expertise, and we're able to come up with a template. For instance, a business plan template, which is an essential part of any major hosting. We have a business template for that. A scope of work, being able to determine what the scope of work for an event is. We've got one of those. When you're building capital projects for a major event, we've got an event contract template. Okay, so instead of recreating the wheel and coming up with an event contract between the rights holder and the host every single time, we actually have a template that provides some insight and value to that. We also have a request for proposal template for sport events. So if you own the rights to an event and you're a new sport like a Mud Hero or whatever, you're able to go and use that template, and then all of a sudden you're able to create an easy request for proposal template that bidders are able to easily read, understand, and be able to respond to you. And it also, that template helps identify things that you're going to want to ask, things that you want to tell people. And it can be very helpful for new groups and also for new people in the sector. The sport event bid template, which is really the Bible for a bid, putting together a bid. We're going to focus on that on future slides here. extremely valuable for you guys. That's why I've highlighted it in bold. You're going to want to be able to access that on our members only section and save it for your files. The sport event marketing template, how you're going to market the event. The sport tourism assessment template, which is a template that is used by destinations to an after the fact assessment of where they are in terms of their hosting strategy, how they're doing, how they're communicating with their stakeholders, and what changes they want to make as they go along. Then there's also the sport tourism plan template, which I'm not sure if Blair McIntosh has come in and spoke to your class this year, but he's one of the authors of that. I'm going to highlight it in brief and allow you guys to ask some questions about it. But that is a really, really excellent template tool, a great entry level for anyone new to the sector or anyone doing a bid for a destination, that allows you to sort of itemize what assets and strategic advantages a destination has and what they're able to do and what they should be able to bid on. There's also the sustainable sport event template, which is extremely important. That was built out of the work that was done in 2010 for the Vancouver Olympics. And it really tackled one of the key issues that our members had, which was we need to find a way to do events in a more sustainable and environmentally friendly way. So lots of value in that template, and a transition plan template. So at a certain point in time, you're fighting hard to win the right to host a bid. And once you've hosted, you actually have to carry out and do the event. When you've actually done the event, you actually have to close up shop and make sure that you're able to transition and close the event, because events don't last forever. So the transition plan template helps with identifying key steps and key things to consider. On the CSTA tool side, we've got STEAM and STEAM 2.0, which is the Sport Tourism Economic Assessment Model. And the Pro one, I'll explain the difference between STEAM and STEAM Pro. We also have a bid evaluation model, which allows people on the other side of your major bid as a way to evaluate the bids. We've also got the National Sport Organization bid evaluation model. So this is for national sport organizations like a Hockey Canada, Basketball Canada, to look at the potential things that they could bid on and make a decision about whether or not they would be able to find the funding support and whether or not they should be putting their name forward to bid for that event, or if they should focus on other events. So the first one I'm going to introduce, as I said, it's an important one. We're going to look at the sport tourism planning template. Now, this is the version 2.0. It's available on the CSTA website, and I'm sure Professor Bennett has discussed and shared with you. But I'll go over the overarching values of it. And if you have any questions, you can please feel free to submit those questions to me as we're going along here. So when we're building a community sport tourism strategy, the authors are Grant McDonald, who works with Special Olympics Canada now. Grant McDonald, who's based out of Halifax and a past chair of the CSTA, and Blair McIntosh, who works with Special Olympics and has been a mainstay in sort of the sport tourism world for a long time in Ontario. So what is the purpose of the sport tourism planning template? It's to help communities understand sport tourism and plan to become more actively involved in the emerging tourism segment. Okay, so this is for new people in a small town, or even if you were to take a job with Tourism Toronto or something, you had to get come to grips with exactly everything that's involved in sport tourism and planning. You would be able to really immerse yourself in the expanding the knowledge of sport tourism, assessing your capacity, and setting up vision and objectives. So there's 5 stages. Stage 1 is expanding knowledge of sport tourism, what to know. Stage 2 is assessing your community capacity. Where are we at right now? What can we do? Stage 3, building a vision and setting objectives, where we want to go. Stage 4, developing a strategic approach, how we will get there. And stage 5, very important, evaluation and accountability. Looking back and saying, how are we doing? Are we meeting our goals and objectives? And how are we going to keep ourselves accountable for the goals and objectives that we set out? So the original template was completed in 2004, and what has changed since then? The answer to that question is what hasn't. Okay, so we've seen since 2004, we've seen a tremendous growth of event property values. You have examples where I'll give you a really good example of Volleyball Canada. So Volleyball Canada, I'm not sure if there's any of you on the line that have actually participated in a Volleyball Canada event as a kid. Volleyball Canada was a situation in 2004 where they were losing money hand over fist. New management came in, changed the way that they hosted their events, changed the way that they set up their events, and now you have a situation where they have a national championship that they actually look to charge hosting fees of over $500,000 because they bring a tremendous amount of economic impact and participants from out of town, out of province to this event. So we've seen these event properties, their values have changed because the people that own the rights have gotten a lot smarter about how to set up the events and how to work with partners. We've seen co-hosting models to see Montreal and Toronto work together, to see Calgary and Edmonton work together. These are situations where you would have never thought that possible because there's always, a rivalry between the two cities. But it just makes economic sense for these two cities to work together in these examples. Vancouver 2010 was hosted. Hosting the Olympics provided a lot of positive things, and it really sort of changed the way that Canada saw itself as a sport tourism and hosting nation, and it also made us a little bit more sophisticated into how we did things from a sport tourism planning perspective. The FIFA Women's World Cup in 2015 was an incredible event that still serves today as the largest single sport event in Canada from a sport tourism or sport event side. And it remains to be seen whether or not that will be surpassed by the World Cup 2026, or if the Women's World Cup will still be the standard after that. Toronto 2015, which was the largest multi-sport event in Canada's history, maybe not as big from a television viewership or a spotlight as Vancouver 2010, but the sheer amount of facilities and infrastructure and legacies and the sheer amount of sports that were played as a summer host was incredible and is the biggest thing that we've hosted. And when we look at increased accountability, for those that are hired by destinations to bring in sport events, they have to go back to their government and explain the reasons why money is being spent to bring these events in. They have to be able to explain the economic importance of it. They have to be able to explain exactly why we need to chase after these events and bring them to our town. And some governments officials are very supportive of sport events. Some are much more cynical, and so that they've raised the amount of accountability that needs to be done. And I think that's very helpful for the sector as well. Accountability is never a bad thing. So they think that since 2004, sport tourism has become more strategic. We're not just bidding because we want to have a good time. We're not just bidding because we really like hockey, we really like basketball or swimming or whatever. We're bringing it because we think it's going to attract people to our destination that are going to bring new money into the economy, and we're going to have some incredible experience that may create facilities and legacies for our citizens to enjoy during the event and long after. So that is the hope. Now, the question is on the slide, or is it? Sometimes we have a situation where you have best intentions for destinations, and when they use our tools and templates to assess themselves, they come back and say, maybe we could be a little bit more strategic, and this is how we would do it. So the value of sport tourism in Canada has increased from $1.3 billion in 2004 up to $6.8 billion in 2018. So think about that. We have a situation of about $9 million a year is being spent on international hosting events from the Government of Canada, which is our largest supporter of sport in Canada. And it's being rewarded back with $6.8 million in economic activity from the sector as a whole. So that's incredible numbers that we're dealing with. Also relatively recession proof. And so we need to make sure that we let people know outside of the sector that kind of incredible economic impact is being created by hosting these events. when we look at our sector, there's competitiveness on the rise. We've got cities, more cities are knowledgeable about sport events and how to do it, making things more competitive. We've got destination marketing or management organizations hiring specialists that's job is to bring events to Whistler, to Vancouver, to whatever, and they base it on all the skills and resources that they have within their destination and their community. They're doing things more competitively and more intentionally. We've got provinces that identify the importance of sport tourism, are willing to put money through international hosting funds or national hosting funds in order to bring events to their province. Examples of that is Saskatchewan, Alberta, Quebec. Almost all the provinces have now adopted hosting policies in order to identify ways that they will support international events and what they prioritize. We see an increase in venues. Venues are no longer created just because we need a new facility for the community. We build it because we want to provide something for our citizens, and we also want to use that to attract people to come to our town to use it for events or even to move to our destination. We have done a lot of work in economic development, the way that we talk about events, the way we talk about money. If anybody paid attention to Calgary 2026, one of the reasons why the plebiscite or the referendum had a unsuccessful result is because there was a lot of discussion about economic development and whether or not the money spent on the Olympics was better to be used on the Olympics or something else for Calgary, which used to be an extremely cash-rich province and city, and now has fallen on harder times due to the oil industry. We see competitiveness in terms of sport. Sports are getting better at the way that they do events. They're getting better at results from an Olympic perspective. A lot of you are too young to remember the good old days whenever Canada would go to an Olympic Games and be hovering around the 10 medal to 12 medals. Now we have the most recent games, we had 29 medals at the Olympic Games, and we also did incredibly well at the Paralympic Games as well. So those are the competitiveness has allowed us to be better suited to host events internationally because we are a world player in many of the sports. And we also see a rise of cultural organizations that are really providing expertise or support in terms of hosting events that suit their cultural needs. So that is the sport tourism planning template. You're able to use those 5 stages. You're able to access it and go through. If anybody has any questions about the sport tourism planning template, please let me know. I'll just take a couple of seconds here if you'd like to ask questions. If not, I can move on to STEAM 101. All right, so I'm going to jump into STEAM. If you have any questions and it could just come in, I'll stop and I'll retrace and go back there, okay? All right, so when we talk about the sport tourism economic assessment model, we talk about the background of it. One of the objectives of the CSTA is to raise the profile of economic benefits associated with hosting events. Our initial research in 2000 found there was no nationally consistent, accessible, and affordable method of quantifying the impact of events. Why would we want to do this? Well, there's lots of reasons why we want to know what the economic impact is of events. We want to be accountable. Okay, if we're going to be getting money from taxpayers, we want to make sure that when we spend that money to build something or to host something, we're actually bringing money back into the economy for the benefit of our citizens. We want to provide value and analytics for our sponsors. We want to let them know that what they're doing and when they support us is actually reaching their customers or reaching their key demographics. We want to benchmark. We want to find out exactly how much the Grey Cup brings when they come into a town so that they can, the sports and the organizations that are involved with it can actually relay that on to future hosts. And we want to also use those numbers, those economic impact numbers, as a way of public engagement, a way of speaking to government leaders or taxpayers in a way that they understand. It's not enough to just say we should be hosting sport because sport is good. We need to explain why sport is good and for various reasons, not just economic, but economic does play a big role. On the accountability, we have justification of public sector investment, give legitimacy and return on investment, and we use economic impact along with other measures to rationalize the level of investment. You know, we are spending this much money to build this facility, to host this event, because we know from past experiences we will have an economic impact that makes it a benefit for the community. Sponsor side, the key objective of sponsors is to be associated with positive impacts. We want to allow sponsors to demonstrate how they are investing in and supporting the community. That's extremely important. On the benchmarking side, we want to provide data needed for future events. We want to ensure that you are maximizing the values of the events that you are hosting. And on the public engagement side, as I said, we want to support displacement caused by events. We want to demonstrate the value of sport tourism to the local community in the language that matters most. So yes, whenever you displace people from your golf course and say, sorry, you know, Sir Winston III, you're not going to be able to golf this weekend at the Royal Club. But the reason why is we're able to bring in things that are going to allow us to make improvements to the facility long term to ensure that the club will be able to run because it's bringing in additional revenue. Those are the types of arguments that even the most staunchest person that wants to golf on that Saturday is going to say, you know what, that's a good idea. How can I volunteer? How can I help out? Our model, because there wasn't a readily acceptable model, our model is the Sport Tourism Economic Assessment Model. It was originally launched in 2002. It was developed in partnership with the Canadian Tourism Commission, the Canadian Association of Convention Visitor Bureaus, and Sport Canada. It predicts the economic impact of a sport event on a community, and it was the first web-based tool of its kind. Now, I know that sounds kind of hard to believe, but in 2002, that was revolutionary to be able to do an economic impact and have a web tool online. Contains spending profiles from most recent Statistics Canada data and primary research at more than 200 events. So we use all the research that we've done over the years in order to provide a better sense of exactly what the impact is. There's two types of the STEAM model. There's STEAM versus STEAM Pro. When you guys are doing your major bid project, you will be using STEAM 2.0. You won't be using STEAM Pro. So STEAM 2.0 is a pre-event EI projection. It has limited information. You're provided with a bunch of prompts whenever you log in, and you're able to provide all the data of both how much you're going to spend in terms of capital infrastructure, how much you're going to spend from a operations and administration point of view, and how many people you expect to come in, whether it be participants, spectators, media, VIPs, how much of their costs you're going to cover, exactly how many days they're going to be staying, the average stay, those kinds of spending profiles are already embedded in the model. So you simply provide the data as best you can based on your budget and based on your expectation of how many people are going to show up, and it provides the economic impact that you would then share with any group that you're going to be working with on a bid project. The STEAM Pro is what happens actually during and after an event. So what we do is national sports or destinations will engage the CSTA to send out our STEAM team, where we have surveyors and economic consultants that actually put together a survey that's used at events. So if you've ever been to a Grey Cup, a World Cup, something like that, where you've actually had people stopping to ask you questions about how much you spend or how long you're staying, those are exactly the type of people that we have out on making those questions. The questions are very important. So the next time you get prompted to ask those, to answer those types of questions, please take part in the survey if you find yourself from out of town. The real focus is to find those people from out of town and to find out exactly what they're spending, so we can compare what we did before the event itself with STEAM 2.0 and compare it to what the reality was, the STEAM Pro 2.0. We also, with STEAM Pro, we have post-event analysis. We take that data that we collected, we put it into the STEAM Pro model. We're able to provide some post-event analysis about economic impact, number of jobs, number of taxes created, that kind of stuff. And that allows us to provide a full EI assessment of the event. When we look at examples of the economic impact assessment for events, so consider the 2012 Ontario Cup Major Midget basketball championships. So it was held in May 2012. It was held in Ottawa. 87 teams. There was 1,305 participants. There was 1,949 out-of-town spectators. They came in and they spent over $421,700 into the economy. The GDP, gross domestic product, how much new money came into the economy was $447,300. The economic activity, overall economic activity, the respending of some of that GDP was $967,800, and they created about $219,000 in taxes. So brought a lot of taxes in for the local economy, brought a lot of taxes in for the province, and it really allowed Ottawa to benefit from hosting these people just by having the facilities and having the event organizers able to bring those people in. If you're going to be talking to people outside of the sport community about the economic impact of an event, really one of the safest numbers to take is always to focus on GDP. That's actual new money being brought into the economy. And as you can see here, $500,000 for one event, just because there were so many people that came into town and supported the event. On the FIFA Women's World Cup side, this took place from June 6th to July 5th, 2015. 6 cities. It was the largest single sport event ever hosted in Canada. $216 million in initial expenditure. The GDP was $249 million. That's a lot of hotel nights, a lot of restaurants, a lot of clothes purchased. And this is the incredible data that we captured from all the out-of-town people we were able to survey. An estimate of $494 million in economic activity, $97 million in taxes that came in as a result of hosting the game, 174,000 out-of-town spectators, 96,000 came from the USA, 1.3 million tickets were sold, 2,300 volunteers, and the broadcast of the finals and the event reached over 200 countries. So this was like a perfect event in that it created a tremendous amount of economic impact, drew a lot of people from all over the world, especially from the States, and it was broadcasted all over the world. So people got to see Canada as a soccer destination and as a host destination. A little bit closer to you guys is the NBA All-Star Weekend, which was held in 2016. I remember a great dunk contest, and it was definitely cold that weekend as it is today, but it was definitely a successful event, hosted over a 2-day period. We had a GDP of $17.3 million in new money brought into the Toronto economy. There was $5.6 million in taxes supported, $11 million in wages and salaries, and 19,400 out-of-town visitors. So because these people were from coming out of town, it really created money in order to hire people in across the service sector in order to support these people during their stay. So when you have a lot of events in your city and town, you can show how even just one event can help out a destination. If you're hosting events on a weekly basis, it really provides value to the government and to local taxpayers. What are the revenue sources for economic impact? Where does the money come from when we talk about the GDP? Well, the money comes from expenditures from out-of-town visitors in the community. We don't talk about money that comes from people that are already in town. If you already live in town and you go to a World Cup event or you go to a World Basketball event or an NBA All-Star game, that's money that you would have spent in the economy anyways. So it's a really key difference. You're really focused on what's the money that comes from out-of-town visitors into the community. Because that's new money. And then we look at expenditures of organizers in hosting the event. How much is spent into the community that wouldn't have otherwise be spent towards building new facilities, building temporary infrastructure, or buying things in order to host the event? And what about construction of new venues and facilities? Not all events need the construction of new venues and facilities, but whenever you have to build things, you have to hire people to build it. You have to buy the materials. Those kinds of things can provide an economic bump in terms of revenue for hosting events. How EEI models work: you've got the number of visitors plus the spending of the visitors, which leads to tourism expenditures. Tourism expenditures, your operations budget, and your capital budget leads to event expenditures. Economic multipliers are then done within the model. The model has been built by Conference Board of Canada that assesses StatsCan data and is able to figure out exactly spending profile of sport tourism people in specific areas, which differs by community to community. and then it's able to estimate the economic impact. So they're able to estimate how many jobs we created, how many taxes we took in, what the GDP is, and what the total activity is. One of the things I'm going to say is whenever you get into your bid project and you have Professor Bennett makes you do an economic impact assessment, I'm sure you're going to be able to reach out to us. I know that I'm one of the contact people for STEAM, for the STEAM team. But the first thing I would suggest is to go onto the STEAM page and download the very valuable STEAM 2.0 user guide. It takes you step by step through each of the pages within STEAM whenever you're entering data, explains exactly what that page means, what's it entail, and it helps you enter the data in. It's really important to follow that guide, and if that guide can't help you, we're able to help you out through email, and it would be very valuable for you to have that as your reference point. Now we're going to move on and talk about the third major tool and template that I want to focus on today. That's really going to help you guys for putting together a sport hosting framework. And when we talk about the sport event bid template, this is sort of the Bible for putting together your bids. Extremely helpful. It's got a bit of a Toronto flavor to it, so I'll talk a little bit about the background and sort of the overall highlights, and then we'll get to some of the questions that you guys might have as you move forward with your bids, or if you have any questions about the CSTA or the sector. So when we talk about the origins of the template, it's actually authored by Bob O'Doherty, who had an extremely pivotal role in the hosting of the Toronto 2015 Pan Am and Para-Pan Am games. He was the Vice President of Sports and Venues. He's hosted a number of international events over a 35-plus year career, and he was the main author of it. It was done through the Transfer of Knowledge program. The partners, again, Destination Canada, formerly the Canadian Tourism Commission, and the Ontario Trillium Foundation, which really wanted to take all the lessons learned from past events through Bob and was able to support us in coming up with this very valuable template. So what is the sport event bid template? Well, the purpose of the sport event bid template is to provide potential host communities and or municipal partners, convention visitor bureaus, economic development agencies, parks and recreation departments, sport councils, colleges and universities, chambers of commerce, etc., with a resource that details of the key elements to developing a winning bid document for sport events of any size at the local, provincial, national, or international level. So it complements the existing CSTA tools you've probably worked on in the past. You've done STEAM before, if you've done planning and marketing templates, and it acknowledges no template is perfect, but this can be easily tailored to an event of any size, whether it's a small one or a big one. This template is the industry standard. Its quality and experience of the author is second to none. Professional athlete, formerly administrator, major games organizer, and senior VP of sport for Toronto 2015, as I mentioned previously. So more notes about the template and its use. It's got a very intuitive format. It's broken up into vital sections. You've got an introduction. Every bid that you should have should provide a simple introduction, executive summary, and a call for why you should be hosting. Then you should talk about the community overview. There's 4 or 5 subsections to the community overview, and what you're looking to do is explain how the community and provide content about the community as it relates to sport hosting and their ability to host events, and this event in particular. You also want to talk about the host organizing committee. You're going to tell them who exactly is going to be involved as part of this process. It's very important to pick people, as it says in the template, to pick people with certain skills and attributes. So if you want, if you're going to be having a bid group or a host organizing group, you want someone that with a background in law, you want someone that's in accounting, you want someone that's in marketing and communication. So being able to provide these people as part of your bid team is very important. It kind of sends the right message that you have people on board that that know what they're doing for critical functions. Then you want to talk about the business plan, exactly how it's going to be executed, how ticket sales are going to be sold, how the games are going to be marketed, how they're going to be televised, and how you're going to make sure that things get done on time and get built on time. On the operations plan, this is where you explain how you're going to be able to carry out the event from a technical perspective. Now, it varies by bid to bid and event to event how much control the rights holder has on actually executing the event, but you want to make sure that you know exactly what the expectations are for the for the person that wins the bid, and you want to let the rights holder know that you're going to be able to carry out this plan with the right facilities or the right course or the right arena, and you want to have the people in place in order to make sure that it all comes together and is done on time. And finally, you want to use a conclusion to summarize exactly what your bid entails, exactly what the idea of the bid, and how you're going to do a job that makes it a best ever event, that takes some rights holders event and makes it better moving forward if you're the one that's chosen to host. And for each section within the bid template, there's a general hosting standards, and then there's recommended bid content. So you want to do the general hosting standards and talk about exactly what is generally what you're supposed to do, and then recommended bid content is ways that you can take your event to the next level and be able to be really creative. So when we talk about the benefits of hosting sport events, the template clearly states them. I want to talk about them today just because I think they're extremely important. And I think whenever you're talking about your bid or you're coming up with ideas for your bid in the future, you want to talk about the benefits of hosting sport events, and you want to have them in your frame of mind as you plan and make ideas. So there's 7 of them, and the first benefit is legacies. So these legacies are financial, infrastructure, sport development, educational, environmental, promotional, etc. I'll give you an example of financial. If you have an event that's extremely successful and has a surplus of money at the end, it can then be used to build new facilities or used for sport for development to provide the sport or the activity to people that wouldn't otherwise be able to participate. You can also use infrastructure that's built as a result of hosting an event. And you can look around in Toronto, there should be legacies from the Toronto 2015 games that are now used. One of the best examples I like to give is in 2015, Toronto had an exciting group of athletes, including, but it didn't include Penny Alexiak, who was 15 years old at the time. And she quickly, after using the facilities in her hometown in Toronto, that were a legacy of the 2015 games, was able to become an absolute star as a 16-year-old at the Summer Olympics in swimming. Now, part of that is just her maturation as an athlete, but the ability for her to not make the team in 2015 and be a 5-time medalist at the Olympics in 2016 really speaks to the benefit of having facilities, training facilities, swimming facilities in Toronto now that they didn't otherwise have previous to that. We talk about sport development and educational to be able to, provide opportunities for education and academic partners to come study games, learn more, and teach people that are new in the sector is very important. We've also got environmental, promotional, etc. Those are environmental legacies. Be able to change the way that you host events is extremely important. We've got a question here from Ansel. So Ansel said, what are the benefits of hosting a World Cup in Canada? So Ansel, thanks for the question. It's a very good time to ask that question. So what I would say is the benefits of hosting a World Cup in Canada are manyfold. One of the ways that it can help benefit is it really helps the sport. The ability to bring a major event that's going to be broadcasted all over the world helps promote Soccer Canada, as an example, as a host of future events. To be able to pull off the 2015 FIFA Women's World Cup was absolutely essential in terms of Canada being part of the 2026 World Cup bid team with the United States and Mexico. We proved that we can do a great job and take the event to another level. No one's ever watched the Women's World Cup more, or it's never been hosted at that level, and we took it to the next level so that when the event moves on to Japan this year, it's going to be something that we've set the bar a little bit higher. From other areas in terms of infrastructure, we already have a lot of facilities that could be used to host World Cup facilities, World Cup games. However, I'll give you the 2015 example as well. We were able to build training facilities throughout the country from Moncton to Vancouver that were a FIFA approved level of facilities. And so we've improved our infrastructure for soccer across the country as a result of having a World Cup. And I'm sure we would need to make some improvements as well in 2026 if we were able to host. And simply the ability to host some games for World Cup in 2026 would provide financial benefits for the hosts. We would be able to bring in people from across the world. World Cup is a perfect example of an event where if you are hosting part of it and the team, if Brazil, Argentina, China, Russia, United States are involved in games in Canada, it's going to bring an incredible amount of tourists that are coming to specifically for the reason of sport tourism, but then they end up having a great experience when they're here as well. So that is sport tourism in a nutshell. It's why there's a great legacy outside of the playing field and the actual experience of watching it and the benefit. When done well, a World Cup can have a tremendous legacy on Canada or whatever nation gets to host. When we look at economic impact, we talk about economic activity, GDP, jobs, taxes. We talk about hosting expertise. This helps build a resume to demonstrate a community's hosting capacity. We talk about volunteerism and leadership development. This increases human resource capacity. I can tell you from experience, I've been teaching at the Algonquin College for over 6 years. We had students that took part in the FIFA Women's World Cup. And it was an incredible ladder for them to be able to have the chance to be working on the World Cup and use that as a launch pad to work with Soccer Canada or with other national sport organizations after going through the excitement of a 1-month World Cup. On the community partnership side, it allows an opportunity for sport to reach out to business, to government, and community to demonstrate the value of sport and to give them a reason to support them and provide sponsorship. One of the things that we find is that Olympic athletes are now being challenged to find sponsors during non-Olympic periods. Everybody wants to sponsor during the Olympic period and have their logo on the Olympic athletes, but the Olympic athletes need support throughout the 4-year cycle. So being able to host events allows us to engage those sponsors and allow them to support our athletes and our teams for longer than just every 4th year. Community profile and visibility. If you've ever watched an event and you see that the way that the ski hill is set up so you can see the beautiful mountains or the beautiful city in the background, that's no mistake. It's done intentionally like that, and it allows, when you host, you're able to host a regional, provincial, national, international event, and you're able to demonstrate where the event is. You'll notice it whenever you look at that picture of Red Bull crashed ice earlier in the presentation. The government of Alberta was a huge sponsor of the Edmonton Red Bull crashed ice event, and every time the skaters went down, you were able to quickly see exactly where it was being hosted and who was supporting it. And community quality of life and sport. There's a lasting halo effect on the community as residents. You talk to people in Vancouver about hosting the 2010 games. They don't talk about some of the issues that happened early on. They talk about the experience of people outdoors celebrating the games. They talk about the fact that they now use those infrastructure to have a number of different events for years and years and years. And you also look at Calgary. Calgary hosted the Olympics in 1988, and they've been a world-class leader in hosting events since since that time. They've had over 30 years where they've been using that infrastructure and the money that they spent then in terms of bringing ski jumping and bobsledding and luge and skiing, and they've all been brought as a result of originally hosting the games and making that money infrastructure expenditures into those facilities. Now Calgary's at a crossroads. They wanted to host the Olympics in order to refurbish and retrofit those facilities. That's not going to happen. So the city of Calgary is going to have to make a decision about exactly whether or not they want to continue to be a sport tourism player, because their facilities are starting to get old. So, and we've got another. So we've got a list of rights holders, top 10 list. So this is 10 important things that you should definitely have. You should have a motivation to host. You should definitely know why you want to host. You want to say that the host community needs to be ready and needs to be involved. You need to have partnerships in place and groups and organizations and local partners that are willing to support you. You need to have the venues. You need to be able to do a proper job of marketing and communications, have people on board. You need a good, solid business plan that you're not going to lose too much money up front, and you're going to be able to bring people to the city and ensure that economic impact. You need an operational plan in order to make sure that you have a chance for the best chance for success, and you're able to things run very smoothly during the games. You need to make sure that you service the athletes and the teams, not just on the field, but what's your opening and closing ceremonies going to look like? What is going to happen? How are people going to be fed? How are they going to be treated? Where are they going to stay? Is it going to be at the level that they're looking for? A great example of the World Juniors is one of the first things when it's hosted in Canada, one of the first things that Team Rush and Team USA like to do is, if they're in a different hotel or using a different practice facility from Team Canada, they actually go and time exactly how long it takes for them to get from their hotel to the practice facility, as opposed to Canada. And they want to make sure that everything is done exactly equally for them so that Canada has no benefit. So you got to make sure that you do a good job servicing all athletes and all teams, make sure that there's fairness involved. What about the atmosphere and participant experience? It's not just enough to actually go and do the event. Now, you have to come up with creative ways to engage the athletes. For instance, I once, for about 4 years, I hosted a international ultimate frisbee event, a created event that brought people from across the country to Ottawa for a 3 or 4 day period. And one of the ways that we really engaged athletes is we set up the schedule to allow them to participate in the largest music festival in Ottawa on an annual basis. So athletes were able to go and participate in Blues Fest on their off time in the evenings. And it was incredible that you were able to, play your event one day and then be able to enjoy Snoop Dogg as well at nighttime. That was one of the featured performers. So we worked with the major festival in order to provide tickets and make the experience one that people didn't forget whenever they left. And in terms of enjoying the experience, you got to set yourself up that you're going to enjoy the experience. It's far too long, far too complicated to be in a situation where you're running an event and it's an exhausting or an unpleasant experience. You got to make sure that you're setting yourself up to host the experience and enjoy it. So when we talk about sample event bid milestones, some of the major ones that when you find yourself in a bid project, you're going to do a request for proposals or letters of intent, and you will get responses for those. You would do bid manuals. You would scour those manuals that you're given in order to make sure that you understand everything that's being asked of. You would understand the bid process. Usually every process is different based on the organization, based on the event. If you want to go on to the CSTA website in the members only section, there's a section called Up for Bid, and we list all the current events that are up for bid right now. And these ones allow us to allows us to highlight exactly all the opportunities for national sport organizations. When we look at the bid award, that's how things will be decided, evaluated, or whatever, and how it gets announced. Then after the bid award, the excitement, there's actually a hosting agreement that has to take place. Your bid project probably won't involve this, but it would involve, in real life, it would involve an actual agreement between you, the bidder, and the rights holder, and coming up with contractually figuring out ways that we're going to work together in the future, and how we're going to safeguard to make sure that this thing stays on the rails and is run properly. And then there's followed that is contribution agreements. If you're hosting an international event, or if you're hosting a national, provincial one, and you have government money involved, you have to come up with actual contribution agreements between your organization and the government. So there's going to have to be an agreement that kind of outlines how the money is going to be spent, where it's going to be spent, when it's going to be spent, how you're going to get that money, and how you're going to report on that money to make sure that there's accountability and transparency. And then I just want to allow you guys time to ask questions, either about your bid, if you want to ask me for any advice on it, or if you have any questions about some of the tools and templates that we followed, or any of the other questions you have about the sport tourism sector or particular events. I'd be more than happy to answer that. But because I know that you're doing a major bid project, because I know that you already have a familiarity with sport tourism, I have a guide, a quick guide for your major bid projects. Okay, so I provide this for our Algonquin students as well. They're doing a bid project, and one of the first things I say is one of the things you have to make sure that you're doing when you're in the bid process is to know your bid manual in and out. Okay, you get the bid manual from your professor, you get it from your competition, you look through it, and you know exactly what the deadlines are, what exactly is being asked. One of the things that you might want to do is, as a group, go through each section, come up with the mandatory and minimum requirements. Okay, so mandatory or minimum requirements, meaning if you don't meet those in your bid proposals, you'll probably be booted out and not have a chance to actually win the bid. You never want to lose something because you missed a detail, so it's important to go through those manuals, know them really well, and proper reading and revision is really important. And if you have questions about a section, that's okay. People that put together proposals, sometimes they leave something out, or they don't really clarify things properly. But asking questions early and often is really important in terms of getting the jump on your competition. So ask for clarification. If your bid manual is missing something, usually all the teams will be notified if there's something missed. If there's something that's just a nuance or a clarification, sometimes you get an advantage by asking the right question. All right. Another thing about bid proposals is, I know that when I work with my students at Algonquin, you're going to have a situation where a lot of projects and assignments have rubrics. And rubrics are awesome because it lets you know exactly how you're supposed to respond to things. Proposals, and in real life, it's a little bit different. Yeah, you have an outline for mandatory and minimum requirements, but you also need to know exactly how am I going to add value to this to make me stand out differently. So you're going to want to know everything that you need to know, and then you're going to want to know the ways that you could be more creative, the way you could stand out, come up with some really cool ideas. And I really appreciate students that come out and come up with really unique ways for how they put together a proposal or ideas. The best example I can think of is we actually have a couple years ago, we had a team that put together a proposal for a international cycling event, and it was their proposal was half festival and half actually running the event. And I remember one of the evaluators said, geez, I really don't think that they got the cycling part, but I really did like their amazing festival. I'd actually want to go to that festival, the off-road things that they had planned. So you want to be one of those things that you actually run the event technically well, but you also come up with some cool ideas to make it a memorable sport tourism or sport event experience. Please use the CSTA tools and templates. Even if it's just for reference, go through those templates that I highlighted for you. They're clearly outlined, intuitive, and they can really give you a jump start. Use the user guide. If you can't understand how to do Steam, please feel free to send me an email. My email information is right on the Steam website, and send me an email to help you out with that. And proper project management and deadline setting. Don't leave things to the last minute, okay? If you're going to be one of those groups that leaves it to the last minute, chances are you are going to miss something. You're going to miss out on something in terms of passing on key information, or not coming up with an idea, not being able to flesh out or write your idea. And when you pass in that bid, it needs to be edited well. Make sure that there's no mistakes. Okay. And you need a team to accomplish the dream. Bid proposals are typically that stage where they're just so big and large and complex, it's really hard for one person in a group to do it all. And I know it's great if there's somebody that's super strong in your group that wants to do it, but you really want to have a situation where you make everybody in the team a part of the overall project, and find ways as a leader or as someone that's following in the group, you want to find your way to contribute as best you can and let other people stand out and shine. And if you really, we've had situations where we've had extremely strong people do major bid projects, not share with their team as much, and in the end, they're beaten by teams that maybe their GPA isn't quite as high, but they learn how to really work together and share the responsibilities. That's the whole thing about being part of a great team. Creative bids are essential. You really want to come up with a way to stand out, come up with a cool idea, and you really want to be thinking, how am I going to take this to the next level? Am I going to do things from a broadcast or social media perspective that really cool? Am I going to be able to do something that really stands out from the festival or celebration aspect? We've actually had students that have gotten jobs based on the creative ideas they've come up with the bid projects. So if you have somebody that's part of the evaluation team from the National Sport Organization or from the advanced rights holder that's actually going to take part, you want to use this project as a way to impress people. A really good question just came in from Marion. Thank you, Marion. She said, where's the balance between managing the events and hosting the other stuff like the festivals, etc.? That's a really great question, Marlon. And one of the things that I would say about that is you are going to be able to make sure that you cover all the basics and all the elements for the actual event itself. And it's the case with a lot of national events or international events. The international event or the national rights holders provide a lot of expertise, and sometimes they want a lot of control about the actual hosting of the event. So you're going to work with them to make sure that you give them what they're expecting. They're going to provide their expertise to make sure that things are run well. They're going to make sure that they have the right officials, the right volunteers, the right standards that are done. And you're also going to, and then when you're able to make sure that that is provided, then you can explore the world of how much the festivals and the other stuff can be exploited and how creative you can get. Obviously, I would say from someone that's been in sport events for over 13 years, make sure that you're actually running the event well. Make sure the business plan is good. Make sure the actual technical operations are done well for the actual hosting the event. But make sure your team would be big enough in order to handle some people focusing specifically on the operational of the actual event itself, and then there's people who are going to have a focus on the festival side to make sure that that's a success too. If you look at all the major things that you will watch on TV, you watch the Super Bowl, you know that there's going to be a halftime show. It's an important part of it. You will look at the Olympics or the Canada Games when your professor walks in with Team Ontario. You know there's an opening and closing ceremonies. So there's some things that are already part of the overall event that you're going to be able to identify, and maybe you don't add new things. Maybe you just find a way to do those things better. So if you have any more questions, you can please feel free to send them in. On behalf of your professor, I want to thank you guys for attending. I hope that you guys are all safe from the snowstorm that's happening right now. I know it's coming to Ottawa very soon. I'll be teaching a class, and I'm actually going to be moving our midterm exam online because I want people to get off the roads. I hope you guys have safe. We have a couple more questions that are coming in here. I guess someone asked me a question about some of the examples I've had working in the sport event sector. Now that your professor's at a major multi-sport games, I guess the example I would give that was kind of a special event that I've been to. I've obviously witnessed the games in 2010, the Vancouver Olympic Winter Games, but I also had the chance to do an economic impact assessment on the ground in Yellowknife for the Arctic Winter Games, which is an amazing event featuring all countries in the northern Arctic Circle. And if you ever get a chance to volunteer or work on those games in some capacity, it's extremely wonderful, amazing spirit of sport and sharing, and also culturally, it's fantastic. So as you move along your career, I'd suggest you guys sort of challenge yourselves to be volunteer or be part of those types of different events to get that experience. And I'm getting some other notes from you guys saying thank you. I want to say thanks to all of you who have sent thank you chats, thank you messages. I hope you enjoyed this seminar, and this video and the handout will be provided to your teacher so that you guys will be able to reference it for your exams or for follow-up. You can find my information on the CanadianSportTourism.com website. If you have any follow-up questions, good luck to you on your class, and good luck in your careers. Okay, thank you.